Welcome everybody. I'm really excited to have today's panel together. These are three guests who are fantastic in their own rights. Two of them are brand new to me and to Clarity Web Design, which is my business. And James has graced us with his presence and his insights in the past, which is awesome. So I'm really excited for this conversation. And I really want to just start by saying I really appreciate everybody who has signed up to join us today, both the speakers and the attendees. You know, it's a lot to ask, you know, to come into a webinar in the middle of your workday or whatever time of the day that it is. So we really, really appreciate your time. We're very grateful for any participation you want to do. These are very as for like a housekeeping point, these roundtables, we run them monthly. We've started calling them the Female Founders Roundtable, but that's like, I don't know, I might change my mind. But the whole thing is like, it's a conversational, informal structure with an assortment of people who have a ton of expertise and a ton of really practical insights. And we want to get away from this sort of marketing language and marketing tactics that don't work for the majority of small businesses and business owners. So that's sort of the main goal here. And we want to make websites that work because we're web designers here in Nova Scotia. So I'll start with a quick little review of like the goal of the conversation today. And then we'll do a little intro for each person. And then we have, I think, 4, maybe 5 sort of guiding questions. And we'll just sort of chat about stuff. One of the things that Jen, one of my guest speakers today, had mentioned is that when we're having a conversation with multiple people, it can be really helpful for those of us who are talking to do some kind of a self-identification before we jump into the conversation. It helps people who are listening or watching or whatever keep track of who's saying what. And so I've already told Jen I'm not used to doing that. That's going to require some practice from me. So we'll see how we do. So that's just a little reminder for everybody that we will try to make it simple to, you know, keep going and understand who's saying what. So our goal today then, we're essentially we want to talk about ways to move your website from being invisible to unmissable. The folks who are here today have a variety of skills that I think are going to speak really directly to that. And I think it's going to be really cool. So I'm really excited to get into this. So I think we'll just jump in to the intros. So there's a lot of moving parts, you know, to making a website go from being the best kept secret on the internet to being this really high-performing conversion machine, which is what everybody sort of expects. You know, they launch their website and they just think this magic wand is going to sort of do all of these things. So these experts that we've gathered today are going to share insights from their own experience and their own perspective, with either with their own business or working with clients, you know, whatever's sort of relevant. So before we get right into the intros, I actually have a question for the attendees that are here live with us. If you can type in the chat and put in how techie do you want us to go? Like we're going to try to keep it really kind of low on the jargon. Some of us might get a little more jargony on a regular basis than others. So we're going to try to keep that really simple and understandable for the majority of folks. Tech it up. Thanks, Heidi. Okay. All right, I think I'm okay with techie. All right, well, we'll sort of balance it out, but we're going to try to keep it, here's my guiding line, is that we're going to try to keep it fairly simple and understandable. And then if we get into maybe some more techie stuff near the end, like with the question, the Q&A part, maybe so we'll do that, but we'll see how it goes. So thank you, I appreciate everybody's techie, that's fantastic. Okay, that's cool. All right, so I'm going to start with the intros then. So I want to say welcome again to my guest panel today. We've got James Warnken. James, do you mind if do you guys mind if I read the little brief bios that you provided to me, or would you prefer to introduce yourselves?
Either way is perfect with me.
Okay. In the interest of not running out of time, because I don't want to run out of time with our conversation, I'll go through that little ditty that you guys provided for me, and thank you. So James has been losing his vision for the last 18 years and has currently nearly a decade of experience working in marketing, tech, and accessibility fields. James provides a wide range of digital services to help organizations design, build, optimize, and maintain an accessible experience that everyone can enjoy. It's awesome. Next, we have Jen. Jen is, I wrote down accessibility consultant and accessibility expert, which I think probably covers it. There's probably more as well. And Jen helps web agencies to implement accessibility without in-house accessibility specialists. So support from initial bidding to launch to continuing improvement and maintenance. So we're really happy to have you here, Jen. And then Polly is an SEO writer and consultant who helps brands increase organic website traffic and generate strong leads through SEO blogging, and SEO is search engine optimization, which I probably don't have to spell out for this particular group. Generate strong leads through SEO blogging and website copy. She enjoys working with service providers and other businesses that inspire the good things in life, including wellness, travel, entrepreneurship, etc. So that's fantastic. I love all of this. I love all of the words that we've used so far. So my name is Steph. For anybody that's joining us today that is not familiar with me or my business, I am the founder of Clarity Web Design Studio. We're based in Nova Scotia in Canada, and we provide services with mostly female-founded website businesses throughout Canada and the US. I've been building websites for about 15 years, and I've discovered in the last maybe 5 that the most beautiful website in the world is useless if it doesn't connect with its audience. So now we focus primarily on website rebuilds, and we provide a service that we call a website rejuvenation. And as part of that, we build in user experience, SEO, and accessibility to the best of our abilities. And we see an average improvement in organic search traffic of about 450% when we do these rebuilds. So we're really, really passionate about what we do, and I'm really, really excited for this conversation. So let's jump in. For us that are here today, for my guest speakers today, my first question, because I think we have a variety of experience in the accessibility framework, like whether it's sort of a personal thing or a work thing or not at all. So I'm curious, of my speakers that are here today, if accessibility became part of your business, because Polly, I don't know if this is something that is in your realm, what shifted for you when accessibility became part of your growth strategy? And if anybody wants to jump in and start, and we'll try to do that self-identification thing, or I'll pick and choose, whatever works best for you guys.
I'm happy to start, and I actually do have, definitely use this in my business and for clients. Accessibility is a big part of SEO, and I think a lot of people don't realize that. Making your website accessible does help you rank on Google. It actually makes it easier for search engines to crawl your website when it's accessible. And so with this, I mean, you can reach more people, which is obviously a significant part of my work in search engine optimization, where we want to reach and connect with more people, and not just anyone, but, our target audience. And, when your website is accessible, people stay on your site longer, which is key for conversions. And not only that, but having people get to your website, finding that it is easy to use, they're going to stay longer. And this sort of, I guess, indicates to Google, like, okay, this website offers a good user experience, which improves your rankings. So it definitely has played a role in my own growth strategy for, my website, but for my clients as well.
Yeah, excellent. I'm glad to hear that. That's pretty much just summed up the whole the whole approach, right? Okay, so that was Polly. So just a little note, self-identification. Yeah, sorry. Okay, see, I'm already flubbing on that. All right, James, would you like to give us a little what would be for you, because you would have a personal and a business perspective on this. What shifted for you as far as like a business growth strategy goes when you started having to factor in the accessibility?
Yep. So I always say that my accessibility journey, I kind of just fell into it. So coming from a background in marketing and tech, I was building and designing websites, optimizing them for the search engines, doing all the marketing stuff. And in a conversation, somebody asked how I was making the websites more accessible that I was working on. And as an individual with a disability, I was always told growing up in school and college, in that employment search, and even throughout just life in general, I was always told, as somebody with a disability, you have to advocate, you have to make it accessible for you. And so I didn't grow up knowing that there was an accessibility industry out there that was focusing on making sure that from a business perspective, we were kind of doing that meet in the middle, where the user's coming in and we need to design the experience to fit whatever or however they're coming in to our websites or our apps or whatever that might look like, social media. And so once I learned about that, I had to go through some personal stuff, getting over the fact that I didn't like disclosing that I had a disability to begin with, let alone talking about it and leveraging it in conversation to make things more accessible for more people. And so as I got more comfortable personally, it sort of really just opened up that opportunity and that door to make accessibility just a core component of everything that I and my team do. Accessibility, whether we're doing marketing, we're developing content, we're designing websites, whatever we're doing, accessibility is a part of that. It's not a separate line item in the budget or anything like that. It's just baked and built right in now.
Wonderful. Love it. Okay, very cool. And Jen, can you give us what would be for you when accessibility, because I feel like accessibility is your business. So
Yes.
was there a time that it wasn't? And can you tell us about what shifted for you?
Yes. So I started with WordPress and I had never heard of accessibility. That was back in 2011. And I was working for WordPress agencies as well as individual businesses. And I was doing a lot of different WordPress builds. At one point, I was doing at least one build a week. And so at that point, I had to improve processes. So I did. And then I found out about accessibility through some connections, and I found it really interesting. And so I started diving more into it. And I do have some issues that come up periodically. I have brain damage. So speaking is sometimes a very challenging activity for me. Most people don't know that. I've had people come up and say, wow, you are such an amazing speaker. I don't have anywhere near the talent you do. I could never do it. No, you don't have anywhere near the work that I've done because you have more talent, because you've never had to go through all of the work I have. So a lot of times people mistake talent for effort, and you can really, really rise above a lot of other people when you put in the work and the effort. And that's what a lot of people with invisible disabilities have to do on a regular daily basis to fit in and act normal and basically just not receive judgment or questions every single day of their lives. So I really identify with a lot of other people who have invisible disabilities, learning disabilities, cognitive disabilities, all sorts of different challenges. And they mask so well that people don't notice, but they still have to deal with that every single day. And so by incorporating the different accessibility strategies, we just make things easier for them. And they like easy. They come back to easy. And then I try and relate this to other clients, and I point out, have you ever had a bad day? Of course, they've had a bad day. Their friends have had bad days. Their family has had bad days. They've had injuries and sprains and migraines and flu and everything else. Who do you really remember? You remember someone who was there for you when you were having that bad day. You remember that connection. You remember, oh my gosh, they were there for me when the other 5 websites didn't work. I am so coming back here because it was easy, because I actually made it through. And so that's where I try and focus. And in terms of business, by focusing on accessibility, it's forced me to really streamline a lot of my processes to say, this is how it gets done. And because once I start to streamline and put in all the SOPs and everything actually gets faster and easier because we've taken out a lot of the decision making. Okay, we're going to take a look at your brand colors. We're going to figure out the combinations that are allowed, and then that's it. We're done. We're not going to be thinking about it and debating it on each and every page. Nope. We solve it at the beginning, we get it answered, and we move on. And it actually makes up the whole process go faster than it did before I was tying in the accessibility. So that's kind of the impact it's had.
I love that. Yeah, that's wonderful. So and that's really cool. So at Clarity, like my business journey started out kind of similarly, I think, maybe in some ways. Like when I started out, I was building websites that looked pretty because I didn't know any better. And I think they worked. I mean, like the feedback was good, but that I had nothing to show for it because I didn't know any of the stats and the analytics. Like I didn't know any of that stuff. And it wasn't until for me, I was doing that for a while before I started to get these sort of glimpses, little hints that I was missing something from like the whole tech perspective and all of that foundation, underneath that visual, I call it the icing on the cake, is the visual look of the website. And that visual icing can cover up all kinds of problems, and yeah, and the big turnaround time point for me, I'd been sort of learning about it in bits and pieces. And then I attended a webinar that was hosted by a blind web designer out of London, England. And she did a demonstration using a screen reader of trying to access her local municipality website to pay her taxes. And she couldn't, because her screen reader couldn't interpret the code. And that was on a municipal website. And I couldn't believe it. Like it's not even like a business sort of a thing. It's not like a come here and buy my whatever product. That was like civic duty kind of stuff. And it was horrifying. And so from there, I was like, this is something I need to know more about. This is kind of nuts. And then so that was the start of my journey. And when I started learning about all of those interconnections, the user journey, and then the search engines that are rewarding better user journeys and not rewarding the ones that don't provide a good user journey. And then, the search engine optimization piece and how closely that all ties together. It's beautiful. And yet, and that, 1 in 4 people will have at least one disability, and that we are all going to be 100%. Every single person on this call is going to have a disability at some point as we age. So it's like that designing for your future self. It's not just like this. When you start talking about the disability stuff, I find it's a very unless you have lived it yourself or you're someone in your you have a loved one who has lived with some sort of a physical disability or an invisible disability, like Jen mentioned. It's like you don't know what you don't know, and people just aren't aware of it. And I think getting that awareness and finding that messaging around how do we make this really obvious? And I think this conversation is all around making this really obvious. Like if you make it better for that specific group, it's naturally going to be better for everybody. And that just benefits everyone, including the website owner. So this is great. So thank you for that. That was really super.
Steph?
Yes.
Can
This
I
is
just
my
make
assistant, Catherine, by the way.
Hi, everybody. Can I just make a quick request from one of our participants? Would love it if our speakers could do a brief description of your appearance, because that would help a lot. Of each one of you do a description.
Oh my gosh, I've never had to do that before. Okay, I'll start. Well, so I have shoulder length brown hair with a lot of white. I'm wearing silver earrings. I have a pretty big smile, blue eyes, and I have a white background with these weird wire flowers on them as a little decoration that I like to have. And I'm 6 feet tall, but you can't tell. So that's me. I hope that's sufficient. Jen, would you like to go?
female in the 40s, brown hair, long, and generally I try to be pretty friendly looking.
Nice. Polly, how about you?
Yeah, so again, I'm Polly, an SEO writer and consultant. I have short brown hair, light skin tone, blue-green eyes. I'm wearing a dark gray shirt and I have a blurred background.
Thank you. And then James.
Yep. My name is James Warnken. I am currently standing in front of a blurred background as well. Behind me is a bunch of little like knickknacks and memorabilia from different things that I've done over the years. I'm currently wearing a gray collared button-up shirt with short brown hair that's kind of like spiked up and swooped over to the side a little bit, with green eyes and like a short 5 o'clock shadow thing going on. So
That was wonderful. What a great exercise. That was really fun. Thank you, everybody. That was great. All right. So let's move then. So we're talking about how accessibility is a big part of your business growth and how to tie that into the topic for today, from going from being invisible to unmissable. What would be something that you would think is the most common barrier that you see that's hurting a website, either in the search engine traffic or users or both? And to try to get into this self-identification mindset, which I'm still struggling with, James, would you like to go first?
yeah, and I'm going to go back to what Jen and what Polly said in their first responses. Jen, to your point of it's about the experience. It's about having the same opportunities, and when people with disabilities find something that works, they're going to stick with it. Word of mouth is still one of the most powerful marketing tactics that you can get. Unfortunately, we live in a world where people like to talk about the bad experiences more than the good experiences. But the good experience when it comes to accessibility doesn't necessarily happen that frequent. And so when it does happen, it's that breath of fresh air. It's that nice surprise that you want to tell your friends about, you want to tell your family about. And so I wanted to sort of start the conversation there, that when you provide that good experience, you're not only building customer loyalty with that individual, but their family, their support network are also going to hear about that nine times out of 10. And now you have them as well. So you're reaching more than just that 1 in 4 when you create an accessible experience, and when you take that time to intentionally approach that conversation of we're designing, we're building with everyone in mind, not just the people who can see, who can hear, who can use both of their hands, that are at a certain cognitive level. When you think about everybody, you really open up that opportunity to a significantly larger customer base. And from a little bit on the technical side, when we look at it from an accessibility and a search engine optimization standpoint, one, yes, we're making our websites easier for the search engines to understand. Search engines go through our websites and they interpret all of our content, but only what they can read. They can't see the pictures we're using or the animations. They can't see a lot of the visuals that we can. And so they're really only going off of what we tell them. And so when we're providing those alternatives for the search engines, we're also writing those alternatives for users who can't see them as well. And so that line in between search engine factor and real user experience, it does get a little bit gray in that they overlap, and there's a lot of interconnectivity between the two of them. And so when you design something that is based around a good user experience, that has good relevant content for the search engine that they're going to like, chances are your audience is also going to pick that up, understand it, and run with it as well.
That's really great. Yeah, thank you, James. And I love that. So what I was thinking about when you were talking was like, that piece around how we don't typically remember the decent customer experience. We remember the really good ones. We remember the bad ones. So I wonder if maybe part of the mindset around providing this really great user experience is kind of like providing a really great customer service experience. Because for someone like myself who's worked in the retail industry for decades before I started my business, it was all about the customer service. And I wonder if maybe part of this maybe part of the reason why this is sort of a difficult or sort of a conversation that a lot of people aren't having is because we're all so trained online to not have a decent experience. Like whether you have a disability or not, like the majority of websites, when you're just browsing and trying to find stuff, is not a great experience. And so when you do go, even someone like myself, and I don't have any defined disabilities at this stage that I'm aware of. But even at this, even as I am, when I enter a website, if there is a really great user experience, I go out of my way to commend or give kudos or like reach out to the business and say, that was amazing. Like it shouldn't just be that you didn't notice that there was nothing bad, you know.
Yeah.
Like if
Well,
somebody brings me my food and it's okay, great. But you know, maybe we need to really hold these people to more accountability online.
yeah, and this is James. I just want to make two quick points to that end. One, when we're going into designing our websites, the best way to approach accessibility, if you don't have that one-to-one connection or a friend or a family member or yourself with a disability, there are certain exercises that you can go through that I take developers, designers, business owners, leadership teams through all the time, where from a blind perspective, how would you describe this to somebody you were talking on the phone to? So they can't see it. All they have to go off of is how you are describing it. So think of it in that regard, or push your mouse off to the side and try to navigate the website only using a keyboard. You can recreate that user experience without necessarily having a disability yourself to sort of mimic and really understand what are some of those barriers, what are some of those challenges that somebody might encounter while using our website that could slowly but surely add up and compound over time to lower the quality of that experience. And the second thing, going back to that trained level of experience, I think there's also an important note there that we are also trained to avoid the conversation of disability, to avoid the conversation as much as we possibly can until we can. And it all, for a lot of us, it ties back to when we were children. And when we saw somebody in the mall or at the park or out and about that was in a wheelchair, that was using a service animal that had a visible disability, we were told, don't look, don't point, don't ask questions. And so we've just learned that behavior to not look, to not ask, to really not be curious anymore about what we could be doing for those people with disabilities when they come back and try to engage with us. And maybe they don't even have the opportunity. But also, if they do have the opportunity, they're doing a lot on the back end to get to your storefront, to get to your website, whether it's planned transportation, it's buying expensive assistive technology. They've done a lot just to get to the front door. If that front door can't be opened for them, then that's a huge red flag.
Yeah, the Steph here. Yeah, I completely agree. And I love that door analogy because I use that a lot. Because the websites are intended to be like this 24/7 amazing, you know, working while you sleep kind of a thing. And yeah, we talk a lot about, you know, for certain users, whether it's a permanent disability or a temporary one. You know, I broke my wrist a couple of months ago. I'm still recovering, and using AI and keyboard or sorry, what is voice dictation? You know, like all of these things that are supposed to be designed for accessibility. And they were awful, by the way. And that experience of I've lost the thread, sorry, from whatever you were saying, James. That what I liked what you were saying, so I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And yeah, I'm sorry, I completely lost the thread of what I was going to say. As far as then for like a common barrier for you, James, what would you suggest then is like the most common thing that is hurting that user experience? Is it the descriptive element or the just the fact that the code isn't matching what is visibly being presented?
I would say the first and the largest is people using technology that doesn't allow for accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to choosing what platform you're going to put your website on. WordPress has come a long way. Shopify has come a long way, but there's a ton of options out there beyond that, what payment processor and checkout are we using on our website? Is that accessible? Are we embedding our webinars and our podcast players and our YouTube feeds in an accessible way? So it's really figuring out your tech stack of what content are you putting in your website and making sure that you're approaching that from that accessible lens. So yes, a little bit of description. Personally, from a low vision perspective, color contrast is the biggest one that I run into. I'm trying to check out on a website and I hit pay now and an error comes back and there's a little light gray checkbox to agree to the terms and conditions that I just completely missed. And light gray on a white background, very difficult for me to see. So I think it starts at the very beginning in the planning phase with your websites, with accessibility in mind and making sure that not only you're being accessible, but the tools and the third parties and everything that's coming together to create that experience maintain a certain level of accessibility at a bare minimum.
Yeah, Steph here again. Yeah, I love that because it's like it's like that thing where it's easier to build it with accessibility in mind out of the gate than it is to come in and try to apply a bunch of band-aids, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah,
It's cheaper too.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. All right, what about Polly from an SEO conversion copy sort of perspective? What would be a common mistake that you would say would be like something that really prevents the audience from prevents the business from reaching their audience?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely quite a few that I see if I'm being honest, but I guess I would say since I do work a lot with long form content, like blogging, I would say writing it in a way that is reader friendly. You know, I see so many blog articles and just content in general on websites where the text is very clunky. You know, there's a lot of jargon and complex sentences, lack of, headers, which really help with the formatting, lack of white space. And so just a lot of text clumped together that is just really difficult to consume, whether it is someone that has a disability or not, including those who might be using screen readers. So I think it's just really important to make sure that your, text is written in a way that again is easy to consume. And I mean, it sounds easier said than done, I guess, because I do see it so often, but yeah. So I think it's just really important to, think about writing short sentences, short paragraphs, using that white space on your website, using bulleted list, where it makes sense. Yeah, those kind of things.
Neat. So Steph here again. So Polly, do you see I see a lot of chatter on places like LinkedIn around copywriting and how to follow accessibility guidelines around that comprehension piece. Like there seems to be a lot of debate. How long should your sentences, like that kind of thing. So when we do website stuff, we're not really doing long form. Like we're trying to pack in as much value in as few words in like a sort of space without getting carried away, with a bunch of extraneous information that doesn't actually add value. But with the long form, I think it would be a lot more challenging to try to maintain those guidelines. And I just wondered, do you have any insights specifically around when you're writing that longer content? Like, is it just like you were saying, like breaking it into those?
Yeah, I mean, you can using, list and headers and those sorts of things, that also helps make it, it makes it easier for readers to skim, especially those who, whether they don't have the attention span, the time, the comprehension, whatever it may be, to sit there and read 2,000 words or whatever it is. So some of those things that I had just mentioned kind of do help with that side of it, where it does make it easier to kind of grasp, I guess, those most important parts to help with that comprehension. Something else worth mentioning is that I always recommend using an editing tool, whether it's long form content or not. I use Grammarly to check comprehension and stuff like that. So I think
This
that
is
answered
James.
your
I was
question.
going to ask if you used any tools to check the reading level or the reading
Mhm.
difficulty, what those
Yes.
tools might be.
Yeah, and I do that with Grammarly. I use Grammarly for any content that I write, whether it's a LinkedIn post, one paragraph that I'm adding on a landing page. And I have, the plugin for it, so I can use it for emails. And those kind of tools, they're for guidance. Not everything that it tells you, you don't want to follow everything, but you can look at the comprehension and it offers suggestions for making it, easier to read, the language rather. So definitely recommend using an editing tool like that for any content.
Yeah, us too. Yeah, we often use accessibility checker plugin because we do mostly WordPress websites. And I love that, like that comprehension piece. I think it's really interesting because sometimes if you're dealing with a client website who serves, sort of high level executive type audiences, it can be really difficult to try to find a good balance between making the language really skimmable and comprehensible, but still respect that they are expecting a certain type of language. And I wonder, does Jen, we haven't heard from you yet, but does anyone on this panel today have any insights around using that level of comprehension in the language and a translation tool for providing? Yeah.
Jen here. So the reading level is typically the Fleisch-Kincaid reading level, and you want to really cap it out at 9th grade. But when you're trying to reach a large general audience, your aim is actually more around 5th grade, because 5th grade is really, really skimmable. And most people are skimming before they decide whether or not they wish to read. I've dropped into the chat the plainlanguage.gov guidelines. So those are guidelines from the US federal government on how to write for plain language. So they are written for the government and government websites to be able to actually implement simple language with a specific set of checks, so that you can check whether I have varied my sentence length, whether I have used regular line breaks, whether I have used contractions, because most people do speak with contractions, and things like that. One of the things when it comes to language translation, now it's built into all of our web browsers. So for example, if I go to a website in another language, it prompts me, would I like to translate this to my language? Because my device knows that I speak English. So I, for example, was on the German website for their European Accessibility Act, and I was looking at the German guidelines. Now, these are legal guidelines, so they are written at a higher reading level, but the language is super uniform, and there's a very large base of quality translation, because laws across Europe have been translated between languages for decades and decades. And all of that training data is available, and the language is all very, very consistent. So it actually does an excellent job translating this from German into English. I had a friend of mine who's fluent in both languages give it a quick proofread, and he said, yeah, it's like perfect.
Oh, wonderful.
But other websites, for example, I do a lot of baking. So I sometimes end up on some French baking websites. And I was looking up this recipe for what looked like a really cool chocolate swirl sourdough. And yeah, it's delicious, by the way. But the recipe was a nightmare to read, the translation, because they used so many terms that you needed to understand French to understand the meaning. So, for example, we might say that was a total home run. But to someone whose English is not their first language, they might not have the slightest idea what that means. Well, the same is true in pretty much every human language. There's all sorts of little turns of phrase that don't translate. They just don't. When professional translators take that content and they switch it between different languages, they have to completely change those phrases out to completely other phrases. So that's where you really get the difference between what is a good translation and what is a poor translation, is how much really good feeder content is there for that type of content. So could a French baking blog be easy to translate? Yes, but they're going to have to knock out all of those little colloquialisms of French to do it, which may not connect with their French audience nearly as well. So it becomes this kind of balancing game of what's going to connect well to people who are fluent in French versus how much of their audience is translating it into other languages.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's really cool. That's great. That's a great example, Jen. I appreciate that. It's a little bit like, I feel like this is sort of leading a little bit like what happens whenever I talk about AI, and that it's like garbage in, garbage out. So that you're providing this computer software, essentially this program, with an unstructured amount of data, and then expecting them to give you some quality back. And I think it's a realistic expectation, you know?
And this is James. I just want to jump in from the assistive technology side of the conversation. Language is critical when it comes to something like a screen reader or dictation or captioning and all of that. In one, if you've ever heard a screen reader that is set to English trying to read Spanish or French or German, it's quite comical. Because they're reading it still in that English accent with that English sort of enunciation. And the way we speak in different languages, we change our accents, we change our dialects, we change all of that. And so it doesn't even deliver through a screen reader properly. And when it comes to things like auto closed captioning in a Zoom or in a YouTube video, that's oftentimes where those captions start to just kind of go out the window, because they don't know how to interpret, they don't know how to translate, they don't know how to deliver that in a meaningful way anymore. And so it would be kind of our job to step in and make sure that we're filling in those gaps. I've seen very simple example. I've seen even in YouTube videos where they relied on the auto captioning and the name of their company wasn't even spelled or put correctly in the captions, which is embarrassing once it gets pointed out.
I know. No, I'm raising my hand because I've totally done it. I've relied on auto captions and then looked back through it and went, oh my God, you can't have that. Jen, go.
Jen, yeah. So on the YouTube captions, YouTube is known for also dropping tons of capitalization and punctuation on their captions, which means that sentences, everything just runs into each other. And so where you would see the normal breaks when you go to read content, none of that is there. Right. When I've talked to several blind screen reader users who are really heavy into their screen reader use, many of them actually listen to content at like 2.5x, which is 250% of what would be the normal kind of reading speed. James is, when you get heavily into it, a lot of them go with very high rates. They actually prefer to have a corrected transcript of the content and to actually have their screen reader zoom through that corrected transcript, because it's actually a better experience to them than trying to deal with the audio player.
I'm one of those 250% people.
See? That's fast. I'm a 1.75. I like recordings of webinars so that I can go back and zip through them, because I like to read as well. And so I like to read and listen to blah, blah, blah in my ear. And if I have to slow down my reading pace to match their speaking voice, it drives me crazy. but 2.5 is, yeah, it's like, for me, that's like an auctioneer going in my ear. But that's fascinating about the corrected transcript. That's really cool. That's an excellent point. And so, I mean, there are all of these tools out there now that are supposed to help people provide these things. Are there ones that you feel are more successful in providing that kind of, yeah, Jen?
Yes. So Jen responding, I have found the one that I use a lot is Happy Scribe, and I have found it to be significantly better than the YouTube built-in captioning. It actually adds punctuation and capitalization, and you can also train these separate tools on your vocabulary. And as you use the tool more to do more of your transcribing, it will actually, many of them will build out your vocabulary. So for example, I use WCAG a lot, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. It knows that I use that, so it will correctly put it in now. And there's a number of other tools out there, Otter AI and some others that will also do a good job. And especially as you train them more on your content. And that comes back to the whole AI discussion, garbage in, garbage out. You have to look at the training data that goes into the algorithm. And so if you've had, for example, professional speaking experience, you're going to deliver a better presentation, which is going to give you a better transcription. So I usually hit 98% plus correct on the auto transcribe. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, this is James. I just wanted to jump in there. So when I'm doing trainings, when I'm consulting, when I'm working with people, and we get into this conversation of tools to speed things up, to make them faster, to get it done quicker, I always err on the side of caution. Because these tools are only as good as they're programmed and designed to be. So yes, some are going to do better jobs than others. It's our job to figure out which one does that best job, but then it's also our job to validate and verify that it did exactly what we wanted it to do. I've seen far too many examples where big Fortune 500, big Fortune 100s are using AI, they're using Chrome extensions, they're using all of these tools sort of in conjunction, and then they get to a final outcome and they send it to someone like me to do a test or a review of, and I look at it and it's like, it's very clearly done completely by a computer with no human intervention. And ultimately, this whole conversation, SEO, we're making it so we reach more people. Accessibility, we're making it so that people can engage and enjoy our experiences. The computer can help assist us in that journey, but it can never replace that entire journey. And so don't overly rely or overly depend on these tools to do everything for you. They could do 90%, 95% in some cases, but that remaining 5% ultimately comes back on us.
That's excellent. Yeah, I appreciate that, Jane. So Steph here. So I was going to suggest, like, my next question, and maybe Polly, you want to chime in on this as well, would be what's at risk when you're ignoring these things, these types of user experience issues. And I think we have sort of touched on them, but I'd like to dive into that a little bit if we can. And I just want to also point out, James, I know you need to go in about 10 minutes. So we really, just in case I forget to say it when you go, we do really appreciate you being here for this, for the majority of the call today. Polly, do you have any insights around, like, what's at risk for ignoring this kind of these sorts of things, this user experience kind of?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to, I think I can keep that pretty simple and straightforward. It's like, James just said, the SEO helps us reach more people, but if we skip out on these things we're talking about, we're at risk of, like, not converting those people we reach, not connecting with them, which is what we need to do if we want to make conversions in our business. So, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So Steph here. So yeah, I mean, I think we talk a lot about brand bruisers, like that they're putting out all of, and most of us as small business owners, there's all this pressure to create all of this content all of the time. And so we're all putting all of this, pouring this heart and soul and, into creating all of this stuff that's supposed to generate attention somehow. And then you put all of this stuff out there and you have no idea that it's not only not serving you, but it might actually be damaging your brand reputation for a large portion of your intended audience. So that's something that we talk about internally, at least. Jen, what about yourself? Is there anything you would say like that we haven't touched on as far as like what's at risk?
So, I mean, there's a lot of things at risk, but one of them is just people knowing how to use your site. A lot of times I've seen ad dollars and marketing dollars go into getting people to the site, but once they're there, then they don't know what they're supposed to do next. For example, I've seen, clients request that all of their headings be bright blue because their brand color is bright blue. Okay, but bright blue is a link. And especially when I'm on my phone, I don't have a hover state. It doesn't exist. If I see blue text, I'm going to click on it. If sometimes when I tap on the blue text, it goes somewhere and sometimes nothing happens, my assumption is that your website is broken. That's what happened. I had a client who just insisted on bright blue headings. I told them that this was a terrible plan. 2 weeks after launch, they said, no, go back to the black headings. Blue has to be hyperlinked. We've had so many calls saying our new website is broken.
Oh, wow. That's great that they had that feedback. I mean, we don't always get that feedback.
Yes, but they had a user base that actually talked to them a lot because they were an in-person service business. And so people were coming in and they were saying, they were asking them about the new website because with the new launch, they prompted their receptionist to ask about the website. And so they got just all this feedback saying the links didn't work.
Oh,
and it's just a lot of these just really simple things, go into a group of people, ask them, what color is a link? Blue. What color is a success message? Green. What color is an error message? Red. I was paying my bill at a company and they provided one of the dates in orange and one of the dates in red. Their brand color is red. I thought I was going to be a late payment or have fees. Yeah. Everything was actually perfectly fine. But they gave me orange and red. And so I'm like, what's wrong? I know I said this correctly. I shouldn't be getting any fees. But because you presented me the standard error colors, I thought there was an error. The other big one that I see a lot is the divception on websites, where everything on the entire website is a div. Semantic HTML exists. HTML5 has been out for many years now. Buttons are an element. If you use the element, the browser will handle all of the input types, working with the keyboard, working with assistive technology, all of those things. It'll handle all of that for you. But if you try and use a div instead, you're going to have to code a mound of JavaScript and do a whole bunch of testing because you refuse to use the button element. And there's a lot of other times where a whole lot of things can be fixed just by using correct HTML5 semantics. It also allows for screen readers to have proper regions on the website so that the screen reader knows where the header is, where the footer is. The screen reader user can actually navigate around to different sections on the site if it's coded with proper semantics. So that really just, it makes everyone's work less.
Yeah, James, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, Jen, this is James. I just wanted to ask you, because a lot of small businesses are moving to drag and drop editors where in those element selectors, buttons and links are synonymous. And so what's your take, Jen, coming from your background with WordPress, seeing the rise of the drag and drop editor, sort of removing that conversation a little bit around using good semantics, because nobody's using semantics. They're just dragging things around and putting them where it looks best on the screen without ever realizing that they added a button, but semantically on the back end, it's already marked up as an anchor tag as a link. And so now there's that introduced misconception from our end when we're using the drag and drop. But if we're using instructions saying click the button and it's a screen reader user looking for a button, it's not actually there because it's a link. And so I'm curious, Jen, to hear your take on that sort of gap that's being created between using good semantics and having easy access to design with a drag and drop editor.
Yeah. So Jen again, when it comes to the drag and drop builders, it's really on the builder to write the good code. And then it's a little bit on the person building the site to then just not use weird language. And I've seen a lot of small businesses, they still insist that every single page on a site is called a tab. And they are still using all sorts of very incorrect language. And if they're the ones writing the pages, quite frankly, you're going to end up with a very confusing situation anyway. When I tell people, you know, how do I tell someone to reference this button, link, thing, whatever it is? Well, you just reference the name of it. So you tell them to click on, you know, go to our contact page, and you put the quotes, go to our contact page, and then the link or the button or whatever it is needs to say, go to our contact page or submit form or whatever the activity is. You need to put words on that are unique, and then you need to just reference those unique words so that people, you know, who are maybe using a screen zoom, oh, okay, I'm looking for these specific words. Now I know how to find it. I can just use Command F and find it.
Yeah. What's your thoughts, James?
Yep, this is James. I 100% agree. Jen, you just mentioned like 4 or 5 different success criteria within those web content accessibility guidelines. So just using the correct language and referring to the name or the label versus that it's a red button or a blue link or relying on those sensory characteristics is definitely going to give you a better outcome. Not saying to avoid referring to it, because from a cognitive perspective, being able to see and distinguish and perceive that color might be equally as important. So using them in conjunction, but going back to the drag and drop editor, I've just seen that more and more of, we want to use the Divi theme because we get the Divi builder and we can style and customize and build and design all in one. And that's great as long as Divi as an authoring tool is doing their job to write that good semantic, and you as the designer understand design best practices from a search engine optimization perspective and from an accessibility perspective. But going back to your what's at risk question, yeah, you're at risk of not reaching 25% of the population when it's not accessible. You're at risk of somebody coming in and on the we talked about the good experience and the word of mouth being powerful. It's just as powerful on the other end. If I go in and have a bad experience, something is entirely not accessible, not only am I not coming back, but people that might have come there in the first place might know to avoid you now. So you're cutting yourself off from potential. So you have a little bit of reputation in the conversation, and the least favorite part is the legal side. If I can www.yourwebsiteaddress.com and get to your website, especially here in the States, that is public. And that falls under the Americans with Disabilities Act requirement of public accommodation. If I can walk into your storefront, if I can get onto your website with no password or credentials, it needs to be accessible. And it might just be a matter of time before somebody comes along, has a bad enough experience, and does something about it. And so it's not a fun conversation to have. It's actually my least favorite part of this whole conversation. But I think it's a realistic expectation that everybody needs to understand that lawsuits are happening. There was more than 4,000 of them filed last year. A lot of the big companies have already been sued multiple times. And so now they're targeting the small to medium-sized businesses because they're not getting any more money out of the Fortune 500s, the Fortune 400s, whatever lists you want to look at. So it's something to be mindful of at the very least.
Yeah, it's a good point. So I'm up in Canada. So, this is Steph. We're in Canada, and that legislation sort of litigation risk is not the same. But it's interesting what you said about these drag and drop things. I just want to circle back to that a smidge, because what we've noticed is that because we've been doing this for a long time, and we've often will come into a website where it may have started out just fine, but over time, as different hens get into what's that expression? Hens in the hen house, or too many cooks in the kitchen, over the years. And because all of this functionality is being added by these tools, because apparently somebody must be asking for it. They want to be able to go in and restyle an entire section on a page that doesn't match anything else elsewhere. And so I feel like they're adding a bunch of fluff to these design tools that are really, at the end of the day, they're confusing everybody, including the people who are trying to use them. Because there's, over time, you just kind of lose track of what the brand styles, maybe not for a big business, but for small businesses, with small teams or solopreneurs. You go in and then you see the thing and it says, oh, you should do this. And you go, oh, I guess I should do this. So you do that and you lose track of what else is going on, on your website or wherever the thing is. So I wonder if, do you have any insights, anyone here, any insights around how would you either provide a guideline that you can follow, that you actually, you yourself have a chance of following? So we're not going to talk about the big corporations who have marketing teams in-house, we're talking more for folks who are either DIY or they have somebody who's helping them with their website. Is there some sort of guideline that you could provide that it would be here's what you just need to remember when you're getting your fingers in there? Oh, and James, I forgot James has to go.
Yeah, oh. I was gonna silently disappear. I hope everybody has a good rest of your day.
Thank you, James. I really appreciate you making it today.
Thank you so much.
All right. Cheers.
Take care.
All right, Jen and Polly, it's up to us. Is there something so Jen and I think probably have some experience with clients who have come into websites and gotten a little too nitpicky, perhaps. But Polly, you probably have that experience as well, because you'd be coming in and writing the copy for them to put on.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of this is design stuff that I'm not experienced in, or even back end stuff, but I will just paste a link to something I use and I've actually shared with people DIYing their website that can kind of maybe be of help with some of this. But it's, the guidance on web accessibility and the ADA on, the ADA website. So I think this is really important to look at for people that are DIYing their website.
Yeah. So from a copy perspective, so let's move away from the design thing, because actually I'm as a web designer, I don't like talking about design a whole bunch with people because it's so subjective. And I think when you start thinking about the user experience, whether you're talking about people with disabilities or just different context, we're all bringing our own context, even to this conversation, let alone to every single individual experience, when we're visiting a website. So if we move away from the design language a little bit and move back to sort of the purpose of the website, which would be that functionality and the messaging. In my perspective, that would be the written message, which is going to connect to the person that's visiting. So is there something for you, Polly, because we were talking about over time as things can change, is there something around copy that either maybe there's something you've noticed over the years that's changed in how you're providing, what kind of deliverable you're providing? Have you noticed any, has anything changed that way, or is it all kind of still the same as it was when you first started doing this?
I cannot really say. I mean, I've been doing this for 6 years, and I can't really say that there is a big change. I would say the biggest things to think about when you're writing your copy, and I know it can get tricky when you're DIYing it because you feel like there's all these tricks and especially for people who don't have any background in copywriting, and I think it's easy to try to get fancy with it, I guess is what I should say. And I think, but what has stayed the same and what I think will stay the same is that you don't need to get fancy with your copy. Like, keep it simple. Know who you're trying to help and how you help them, and make that very clear with your copy. And that just needs to be your main focus. Like, all of this other fluff and getting fancy and all these copy rules, I just don't think are so important. And I think that makes it, when you're trying to do all of that, it's easy to get lost in that. And really it comes down to the simplicity of, who are you trying to help and how do you help them? And how can you make that clear in your copy without all the fluff and jargon and getting fancy and all of that?
Yeah, that's excellent. So Steph again. So yeah, we talk a lot about that simplicity piece, like keep it simple. And we often have to talk people down from these ledges, where they're like, I need to have 4 calls to action in the top part. Go, whoa, really? I don't know. No, I don't think so. And
Right. And calls to actions, Polly here again. Just to kind of add into that, yeah, calls to action that are like fun and engaging and all those words that people use when they're saying out, but it's like, no, just contact us or whatever. Like, even that should be simple. Like, it doesn't need to be and shouldn't be some fancy I don't know. I can't even think of a good example, but I just see these call to actions a lot of times where I know that people are just trying to be like cute and fun or whatever. And they're like, well, that's my brand voice or whatever it is. And I'm like, no, just keep it simple. It's just contact me or, whatever it is. Sign up if it's an email list call to action or, whatever it is.
Yeah. So Steph again. So, I mean, Jen was speaking to that a little bit earlier, like talking about making sure that like the button has that context so that and that it matches what it's supposed to do. And I think that is something that we tend to forget. Like, people get all caught up in wanting to be cute and clever because someone along the lines has told them that they need to stand out online. And that's great. But maybe like that in this particular situation on the website where people have, I mean, we're all prone to this. We've all been trained to expect really fast, like instant responsiveness on my phone. Like, if I click the link, it better be a link. And if it's not a link, don't make it look like a link. Like, like we don't have any patience for this sort of thing. And so coming onto a website where they're trying to be really cute and clever isn't making me say, like the average user go, oh, aren't they smart? It's more like a, what?
Right. Like,
Jen, with your recipes, like, where is the recipe? Like, everything is, there's so much money you have to sort through first. Never mind if you have to translate it, out of the gate. Yeah, frustrating.
So right, and the clever copy and the fluffy, the fluffness of it, I guess, is like, is that making you stand out? Because for me, and I think a lot of the average users would say that it's, no, the website that is simple and easy to navigate and has content that makes sense and I understand exactly what you're trying to tell me, that to me is what stands out. So
yeah, well, it's like we were saying, you're like, yeah, like if we're all conditioned at this stage in the internet game to expect things to be in certain places. It's not regulated, but it's kind of like on my the last car that I owned, there was a button for the horn. I don't know why. Like, the horn should be in the middle of the steering wheel. Like, that's it. That's my option. But there was a button. It was like, I think it was supposed to be like, make it easy to use without moving. I don't know what it was. I never hit the button. I owned that car for like 12 years, not once, unless I was like consciously thinking about it and not about to get in an accident. Did I actually beep it with this button instead of using the horn? Because this is what I'm conditioned to do. So it's kind of like that when you go to the website and like the contact or the navigation menu is in the wrong place, or it's, maybe it shows up and it doesn't work, or, like all of these things that we do thinking that it's going to help us to stand out, but you're actually impacting that end user experience, which is bad on a whole bunch of levels that we've just been talking about. So what about if there were things that, if there was one change, wait, we haven't really talked about like measurable outcomes, I don't think. Is there anything that either of you could provide insight on as far as how to implement, say, even if we didn't talk about accessibility per se, but like keeping the website really simple so that anybody can use it? Because that really is the end goal. I would, not technically, accessibility is for people with disabilities, but universal design, which is sort of a more overarching thing, is about user experience. So in that framework, if we're saying we're going to keep it really simple, is there one specific change that you could suggest for anybody that's on the call today to think about that might actually grow their audience or improve their visibility online? Is there something that either of you would be like the first thing that you would think of? Jen
here. So I usually say just start by attempting to use your computer with a keyboard.
Oh yeah.
So just put your cursor into the HTTPS bar, the URL bar, and then hit tab and see what happens. On some browsers, you may have to actually enable keyboard navigation. If you use any search engine and you just put in the name of your browser, enable, keyboard navigation, it'll give you instructions on how to do that. But on some of the browsers, you do have to actually enable it if it's the first time you've ever done it. So for example, you could go to w3.org. If you go there and you put your cursor there and you hit tab, and the very first thing that you should see is a skip to content link pop up. If you don't, then keyboard navigation is not working and you need to enable it. Otherwise, just hit tab and go through, and then hit shift tab and go back, and just try and, can you get to different places on your site, or did you suddenly skip over a whole bunch of content and go, but there were like 3 links I just skipped.
They look like links.
They look like links, but they were probably coded as divs.
I'm not going to go panic and look at my website after this. I'm not.
Or for example, the biggest one that I see a lot of people have when they try and do this is they don't have a focus state set up. So for example, we were talking about the Divi builder earlier. Divi intentionally disabled focus state. It's a thing. And so when you try and tab through it, you don't have any focus because they've gotten rid of it. And so you can't keyboard navigate the site because you can't see where it is.
If there's anybody using Divi right now that's attending, you put Divi in the chat, and we'll give you a couple of other pointers about Divi specifically in the chat, because I can say a lot about Divi as well. It drives me bonkers. Yeah, that is a great point. And I think keyboard navigation is one of those things that it's not just for people with disabilities either. There's a lot of like power users. People don't like to use their mouse, or their mouse is broken, or their trackpad is broken,
or they're using a form.
Or yeah. I'm not going to
go click. So Jen. Yeah. So especially when you're trying to fill out a longer form, most people have figured out that if you just hit tab, you get to the next field, and then you can type, and then you can hit tab, and your hands just stay on the keyboard the whole time rather than hopping over to the mouse and hopping back, hopping to the mouse. So a lot of people, when they're filling out forms, do just tab through it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Jen. Polly, what about you? What would be like that one thing that like could really move the needle for somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to talk about navigation as well. So I guess to expand on that, just looking at, your navigation in general. When people are on your website, you want them to stay there. And obviously, we've talked about a lot of things here today that offers that good user experience to keep people on your website and to help with your conversions. But yeah, navigation is a big part of that. And you want to make it easy for people to navigate your website. So I guess if I were going to say, like, here's what you can do today with that, on top of what, Jen just mentioned with the keyboard navigation, also checking the navigation on your header and making sure that you don't have a bunch of pages for people to look at. The navigation in your header should really be the most important pages on your website. Your about page, your offers, your contact page. So kind of, I would recommend limiting that to 5-ish, give or take, links there at the top in your header, and then moving the less relevant ones down to your footer, and also labeling those links for your navigation to copy that's, again, simple. Like, I see a lot of times people will label their blog as journal or resources or something like that. But the average user, when they want to find helpful articles, they're looking for a blog. So label it as such. So I think that could be a simple thing to do today, is kind of checking your navigation, how it's labeled, and how many links you have there in your header, and making sure it's the most important ones, not every single page on your site.
That's awesome. Thank you, Polly. Yeah, it's like, it's not your filing cabinet.
Right. I love
Sure.
that.
I want people to look at your whole filing cabinet the second they land on your site, especially if you have the same thing on your mobile. I would love to suggest that if it was me that was going to say, what are you doing with your website today, is actually to just take a massive step back and test the links. Not every link, but test, like, if the way that you expect someone to get a hold of you to work with you is to fill out a form or book a call or whatever, go and test that link specifically. I don't care about anything else on your website. Like, even before you get into, where's this call to action button, or what are the words that I'm using on this button, or what's my header going to say? Even before all of that, check that link, because I promise it's like 75% of the websites that we first see when people start to come work with us is, I go to, if they're consultants, it's book a call, it's a 404. Or like their contact form, you fill it out, you hit submit, can't get past the reCAPTCHA. Or there's like an error that's like buried in white text on a white background or whatever. And unless you test these things, you might visit, because those of us who are, business owners, we're in our own heads all the time. And maybe we go and look at our website. Some of us spend too much time on our own websites, no judgment, but there are a lot of people do. And some of us forget to check it. Like, we're on sort of the other side of that spectrum. So then we go and like maybe do a quick skim of our website and we think, oh yeah, everything's kind of in the same place, it looks fine. But we don't actually test it. So that would be my thing. Just go and test it and make sure that at least if somebody has to fill out a form and reach you because your website has a broken link or whatever, or they're actually trying to work with you, make sure you can get that email. That's my big thing. Catherine, how are you for time? Yes.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the right time to butt in here. This is Catherine, Steph's assistant, and I just want to let you all know that, there's just slightly over 10 minutes left. If anybody has any questions specific to their situation, that'd be great. You can speak up now, or you can put it in the text or the chat, and we'd be happy to talk about that.
Thank you, Catherine. I did have a couple of questions, so if we don't get any here, while we're waiting to see if any questions show up, let's just do a quick little, because we are close to the end. So Polly and Jen, I would love to make sure that people know where they can find you. And I know we had sort of put some stuff on our website for the event registration, but why don't you give a little and say it? Oh, thank you, Jen, put it in the chat, but I'm going to make you say it as well. Say a little thing about like where people could follow you, get in touch with you, that sort of thing. Jen, why don't you go first?
Yes. So Jen, you can get in touch with me at easya11yguide.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, and I'll drop that link in the chat too.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. And Polly, how about you? Where should people come and find you?
Yeah, so my website and LinkedIn are also the best places to connect. My website is pollycloverwrites.com, and I am Polly Clover on LinkedIn, and I will share those in the chat.
Thank you.
There you go.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Polly. Yeah, for myself, so we're claritywebdesign.ca. And we actually, so here's a funny thing. We actually recreated, it's a little functionality quiz, and it's essentially for like the super basic like going right back to that, what is your website supposed to actually do? And it's a little 7-question quiz, and you can find it on the footer of my website. But if anybody wants to give it a try, it's called Ready to Serve, and it's about like, is your website sort of like, it's like sticking the toothpick, in your cake to see if the cake is cooked, and ready to serve. So that might be sort of fun. Otherwise, yeah, ClarityWebDesign.ca is the website, and then you can find us on social with any of those Clarity Web Design sort of combinations. The folks who have attended today are going to receive an invitation to I have a follow-up webinar that sort of does a deeper dive into what it's like to work with us and sort of show like what kind of, I hate the word transformation, but I keep using it, transformations that our client websites can go through as like direct impact, sort of results of working with us. So you'll all receive an invitation to that next webinar, which is on the 22nd. Otherwise, Catherine, do we have any questions coming through? Because I do have a couple that were pre-submitted.
No, I don't have any that's come up here yet.
Okay, that's okay. So I know at the beginning, people had talked about wanting to go a little techie. Polly, I don't know that techie would be your favorite gem, so we'll maybe skip the techie bits. But one of the questions that I had, and this is actually something we hear frequently, is do I have to redesign my whole website in order to make it better? What would either of you suggest? And this would be, I think, really interesting to hear from both of you on this, because the copy and the functionality is so key, right? So would either one of you like to go first? Jen, you got your fingers up.
So Jen here. So from an accessibility standpoint, and does the code work? Is it semantic HTML and all of that? That is usually the first thing that I consider. So I have on my site a quick audit that I do, and that goes into the top accessibility issues, and it also goes into the cause of those issues. So is the issue caused by the theme? Is the issue caused by one of the plugins? What's the root cause of these issues? Is it caused by the content? Is your content just really causing the problem? Is it how you've entered the content? It's not necessarily the content, but how it's been entered into the site. Is that the problem? So there's a lot of possible causes of what is going wrong or what the issues are. And until you take at least a look on, 1 or 2 pages and you look at, okay, here's a list of things we're going to go through, we're going to test these things. And if they fail, we're going to write down and source what is the cause. Because I can't tell you if you need to redesign your website completely until I know what's wrong and what's causing it. Sometimes it might just be a half day of work, but in that half day because you're using, let's say, a builder that doesn't depend on the theme. So if you've built out most of the website with, let's say, Elementor, and the theme you're using is causing problems, maybe we can switch you to a new theme in a half day and not make a huge number of visual changes. We'll make some, but it might not be a huge amount of changes, but to clean up a whole bunch of the back-end code by swapping out your header, swapping out your footer, and swapping out the actual theme that's injecting a lot of the semantic HTML in there. Or maybe your form builder is causing the problem. All you really need to do is swap it to a different form builder, change it out in these 4 places, and that's actually going to give you a huge improvement. But until you go through a list and you write down the causes, you won't know what needs to be fixed.
I love that. Thank you, Jen. That's great. Polly, what about you?
I mean, I think she answered that perfectly, and I love that she has that audit to kind of offer that support, because I do think a lot of times, maybe even most of the time, it can be very difficult if you don't have a team and you're just trying to figure it out yourself. It's like most of the time you don't really know what you're looking for, so I think having that kind of support from someone like Jen, who offers that kind of audit service is really helpful to figure out what you need to do. Because like she said, it's hard to answer if you need to redesign the whole site or redo everything if you don't know what is causing the issues. And there was something else I was going to add to that related to copy.
Yeah, I was
Maybe
hoping you
it'll
might have
come to
something.
me. Yeah, I did. I was while she was talking, and now I've lost it because I started following up on what she said. Um, It'll come to me hopefully in the next 5 minutes.
That's great. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's I think it's a really interesting challenge, and I think you know, some of the, like, you know, we were talking earlier about how these design tools are adding all of these bits and pieces to sort of make there's this really recurring narrative that you should be able to do all of these things. And I don't know that that's necessarily true. Like, I think it just ends up confusing the person that's trying to provide a really great website, whether it's the designer or the business owner directly. So I love that audit that you do, Jen. Holly, I think I was expecting you to say just go through and make it all really simple and clear. That kind of thing is something that we certainly, you know, we talk about that a lot as well, you know, in our
Right, but the back end and the techie stuff of that, it
Yeah.
isn't always that simple. So I think with the copy and your message, we can say that, but I don't know that we can say that when it comes to the back end of things and how you've designed it. And that's, I guess, why I was saying with that side of things, getting support from someone who is actually skilled in that might be easier. And another thing I was going to add too, because I can't remember exactly how this person worded the question, but it was something like, do I need to redesign my whole website? And I find that a lot too, where people are like, do I need to redo all of my copy? Do I need to redo everything? And then that can be very overwhelming. So people just say, well, forget it, and I'll just leave my website how it is. And then they don't want to use it at all. And so I think it's important to know that this isn't an overnight thing, and that, I mean, I've had my website for the 6 years that I've had my business, and I make changes to it regularly, at least monthly. So this doesn't have to be an overnight thing. You can work with your website, and you should continue to make your website better. I don't think a website should be a leave it and forget it type thing. That's just my personal opinion. But so
No, I love that. Now, I 100% agree with that. I think one of the things that the website is like it's a to-do list, like, or an item on the to-do list. It tends to get bumped to the bottom, and I get it. I totally get it. I have things that I'm supposed to be doing that get bumped right down to the bottom too. But I think there's this idea that you set and forget. You know, you've done it, you're done, and now I don't have to look at it again, you know, for a while. And I think what people then miss out on is that the tech changes all the time, algorithms are changing all the time, our users' behavior online is changing all the time, your business is evolving all of the time, you know, like all of these things should be reflected. Like, it should be a sort of not a moving target, but it's like organically evolving, kind of. Maybe not organic, but it's evolving anyway. And I think it's your brand representation online, and to allow it to just go stagnant is a sin and a waste, I think. So I think that brings us to time, and I don't see any other questions in the chat. So thank you to both. I see we've lost a few of our attendees, but that's totally okay. We really appreciate anybody who was able to join us today, including our speakers, Jen Harris, Polly Clover, James Warnken. Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. So keep an eye out. There will be a replay available, and we'll send out an email that has that link. And I will pay special attention to the transcript and the captions, because I think I'm pretty good with that these days, but you never know. Sometimes, you know, sometimes you miss things, right? So this has been really great. Is there any last word that either of you would like to leave us on?
I don't think so, other than thank you for this opportunity and for everyone who cares enough about this stuff to be here and to give
I
this
think
time.
everybody needs to care. This is your life.
Yes, they do, and a lot don't, unfortunately, but hopefully we're moving forward with that.
That's it. 2025. That's where it's going to be. Everyone's going to take control of their online profiles. Yeah. Jen, what about yourself? Any final thought?
Mostly that inaction is a choice. And if you do absolutely nothing, then that is your choice. You're choosing not to move forward. You're choosing not to change anything. So inaction by itself is a choice. So you can choose inaction or you can choose to do something. So make your choice.
I love it. That was perfect. Thank you, Jen. That was a great new quote. I'm going to write that one down. And I really appreciate your time again. And thanks everybody for joining us today. And we're going to wrap it up. All right. Cheers.